So, Evan, as in every project and every career path, change sometimes is inevitable. Sounds like you might have a little bit of change that you talk about.
Yeah, new chapter in my life. So, yeah, after 18 years of HMC, not entirely contiguous of 18 years, but 4 years as an intern out of college. And then I took a 9 year break doing a lot of other stuff, which we've talked about on this show in various capacities. And then in 2007, going back to HMC Architects, I have, as of February of this year, which is basically now, uh, left HMC and I am joining a technology startup company focused on solving a major problem for architects and manufacturers called Tect. And we are developing a platform called Tect App for solving a very kind of wide ranging set of problems for architects and manufacturers. So yeah, that's the news, man. It's a huge change for me,
Huge, huge
obviously.
change.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, wow. It's interesting, right? I mean, we've talked about it on this show. I think, there's definitely been some kind of information sprinkled throughout some of our episodes. If you were to kind of
Hmm.
go back and forensically kind of take those apart, you might get some hints of foreshadowing things that were happening kind of behind the scenes, but um, obviously not obvious. So yeah, this is a huge change and further stepping away from actual architectural project work, even though I haven't really been involved in that in the last couple of years, developing and creating a team to do digital practice at HMC and
Right.
really focusing on technology. It's just created this need for me, I feel like, to make a something that we do with this podcast. Like we want to make this profession better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like this is a huge opportunity that kind of fell into my lap and it was irresistible. I couldn't pass it up to do that on a day to day basis. And to me, it feels like a perfect fit for the kind of work that I want to do and for the impact that I want to make on our profession.
Hmm. So, what are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so this episode is kind of a special reveal episode of sorts about what the heck TechDAP is, and it's just now getting to the point where we can actually even talk about it. We've been working in stealth mode furiously behind the scenes to get this thing to a presentable state to put it out in front of the two different audiences that we have, which are architects and manufacturers. And so um, we're going to have my boss on the show, Bob Habian, and he's an architect here in California as well. And I've known Bob for, I want to say, about 10 years now, Cormac, that we've probably been talking to Bob.
Yeah. Yeah.
Close to it, if not.
It's
And
been,
so,
seems like it's been a while.
yeah, I mean, it's basically
Yeah.
goes back to the beginnings of this show, I think. And
Yeah.
and Bob has always been a listener, and he's bounced ideas off of us and invited us to Monterey Design Conference events in the beginning to help get us involved in the profession at a bigger scale. And and so he's coming on the show today to talk about TechDAP and what he's been working on, really for like the last few decades, but very seriously for the past couple of years. And so we're going to talk about exactly what the platform is trying to solve and how complex that really is, and
Right.
kind of the excitement behind that we have to take on this problem and solve it for our profession and with our profession.
Yeah. And it's fantastic. And I'm excited to see the launch. And when we dive into this conversation, it's going to just peel back a lot of the layers of a problem that we know we have, but not necessarily know where to go, to take it there. And one of the interesting things about TechTap is that it's actually positioning itself to be able to facilitate this kind of, let's just call it an unspoken problem, because we all know it exists, but we just never talk about it. I mean, we just kind of like continue to status quo the whole thing.
Yeah, it's just
And
kind of an accepted problem that we don't really
right,
think that there's or maybe an unwillingness to give it the attention that it would require because
right.
it's a pretty wicked problem. It's pretty huge. Yeah.
Well, most people, may even think, well, I don't even know if it is a problem. They just say, well, that's just the way we do, business. And the
Yeah.
thing about it is that, TechDAP is positioning itself to be able to say, okay, hey, by the way, that is a problem. And the reason it's a problem is because you're spending even more time, trying to interface with manufacturers and things like that, where, we're able to kind of like take a lot of that, guesswork out of it and get you back to doing what you really want to do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, totally. Totally agree. So, before we jump into kind of your kickoff of this conversation with Bob, I'll just throw out there what TechTap is. And if you guys wanted to pause this episode right now, you could do that and go to techtap.com. And if you're an architect or an engineer, you might want to go to techtap.com/AE. The homepage is really focused more on the manufacturer side for now, at least. But there's a link at the top for architects as well. But
yeah,
TechTap is a new platform designed for better communication between architects and manufacturers. It's built by architects for architects and anybody in the kind of AE side of the business. There's a supply side, which is the manufacturers. There's a demand side, which is the architects, and really solve the problems around real-time access to accurate project information through expertise. So it's really about connecting people to people and not
right.
being just a place where people go to look for stuff. It's not a directory. So that's kind of the short elevator pitch. We get into a lot more detail in this conversation coming up about the
Yeah,
nuance to all that because there's a lot of it. And,
yeah,
and yeah, so, this is a long episode. I encourage everybody to make use of the chapters. We're going to have this on YouTube. We're also going to have it as an episode. We'll have chapter markers for the kind of different areas and topics that we're going to be talking about. And, some of those are more aimed at a manufacturer's point of view. Some of them are more aimed at an architect's point of view. But I think overall, it's great to really, truly understand both sides of that equation so that
right.
you can really understand the depth of this problem that we're taking on. So again, I'm thrilled. This is a huge step for me, and obviously it's big news in my life to be moving on from HMC into this new kind of category of careers in architecture, definitely,
Yeah,
and how there definitely are people who are working more on the technology side because it really is poised to solve major problems for our industry and enable that change to happen faster than it ever could have before. So,
right.
anyway, let's get into the conversation.
So, welcome everybody. Today we have myself, Evan Troxel, and a special guest, Bob Habian. And so we're talking about a problem that everybody in the industry has suffered with, and that's trying to reach out to manufacturers and get new products and new information. And then you find that you have to go through this very circuitous route of really not getting the right information from the right people at the right time, and lots of times things become very unspecific to what you're doing. And so one of the interesting things that our guest Bob has done is develop the Tech Act. And rather than me going through a very long diatribe, I want to turn it over to Bob and let him tell us a little bit about what the Tech App is.
Thanks, Cormac. So nice to meet y'all. I'm Bob Habian. I'm an architect and have a rather long history in manufacturing as well. And the long and short of it is we all know how tough it is to reach manufacturers when we need to and to get the information that we're seeking easily. In response to that challenge, I've been working for quite a while to just shorten that gap. And the key to that is simply understanding a whole lot more about how architects and manufacturers communicate, where the holes are, and have spent a lot of time on the manufacturing side just to understand the subtleties and some of the misconceptions, and some of the holes. So TechDAP is a solution to that that's inclusive of both sides. And my hope is that we can just facilitate better communication.
So I'm curious, I mean, most of the time, especially, when you're knee deep into kind of like your own project management and you're working on a project and you're kind of like running through things, you go through the natural progression of the pain that, we always are looking for new products and all of this other stuff. And, I can tell you from examples far and wide, especially just on this current project, that most of the time when I'm calling up a rep, I get the salespeople, and then there's this bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with, trying to get the right people at the, as part of all of this. And so when you were in the profession, you talked about working on both the manufacturer side and the architectural side. How long has this problem been going on? Because, everybody always says, oh, this is just, clearly it's just a problem that I'm dealing with. And it seems to be a problem that's been plaguing us for quite a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a declining kind of slope of health in the situation. And it's been happening for a long time. I look back historically to a much better fit between the supply and demand sides of buildings and built places, right? Where craftsmen and others made things happen. And it was a very connected, collaborative process. Particularly in an information age, we're drowning in an ocean of data, frankly.
Yeah.
And people get a little bit ahead of their skis on what should be put out and when. And there's now a pretty significant disconnect between supply side manufacturers and an understanding of what's needed at each step of the process on the demand and design and build side. So, there's just a lot of distance. It's growing, but it's fixable. It's fixable. So I don't think we need any new information, new people, better products, or anything like that. We just need better alignment. And so it's really more of an exercise in human factors of change and understanding that even if we've got a great plan to do great things together and back, similar to the way we used to do it in the built environment together, we really need to get a better understanding of where each person is in the process, where each company is in the process, and stitch things back together over time. But I think everyone experiences it on all project types all the time.
Yeah, it's funny is that, we have this huge flood of information. I mean, people can Google things and get, thousands of bits of information about just, I don't know, any product that they're looking for. And for some reason, the easier access to all of this information tends to get us the wrong information, or not the information that we need specific to what we're doing. What is kind of the goal of TechDAP in kind of like reconnecting or kind of like distilling back down to the information that we actually need to get?
It's kind of like asking for directions when you're driving, right? If you don't know where you're going,
how dare you?
Don't try getting there. and so when we go online and we start searching Google and we find, little kernels of information and we pursue those even further, and then we get to a directory of products and then we dig into the features and benefits and the specs, and we don't even know what we're looking at as far as availability, cost point appropriate to our budgets, etc. So the whole notion is, rather than start the endless black hole of search for product information and product data, why not just connect with the experts in those arenas, right? So if I'm trying to make my way through farmland, I probably want to talk to a farmer. Say, hey, here's where I'm trying to get. And he says, okay, well, here's the best way to get there. And he can give me a great answer if he's a better listener as well, because it's not just getting from point A to point B. I might want 5 very interesting milestones along the way that matter to me, and I want to go sequentially to each one. And so it's more about having a conversation that's a good give and take, that's patient and comfortable, that's not about a sale, that's not about a quick close or a quick answer per se, but about clarity and understanding. I often just reference the fact that with every project involving hundreds of products, literally, and behind each product, multiple manufacturers, it's very easy to get overwhelmed because there's simply too much information and too little time to make sense of it all, right? So as architects, we need to give up on the idea that we're supposed to know everything and get back to more of a conductor role, a coordinator role, where we engage the knowledge that's there on the supply side and let them help inform our questions and milestones that we need information for the one primary function, and that is to be able to make an informed decision as a design professional, right? That's what we want to do. And we're trying to find what we need to achieve that, and the tools simply haven't been there. So TechTap is recognizing two sides. One is the lack of the right tools, and then the other is the need to coach folks along in this new arena to better understand each side of the conversation, each side of the audience, and to encourage patience and clarity and openness. And within that last point around openness, there are just natural barriers in our industry and our culture as well, right? If you're an architect early in a project and you want to research 5 different options that you might consider, the last thing I want to do is go to 5 different websites, give them my information, and let them unleash the hounds to come after me, right? I don't even know who I want to deal with yet. And I don't even know if those 5 are going to qualify at all. So it would be nice to be able to reach that information source, talk to actual humans, but not have to tell them who I am or what I'm working on for a minute, So TechDAP also includes factors like that and takes it into consideration and has built an interesting tool set around it that we call stealth communication that is a bit of a game changer as well.
I think in that conversation right there, like you just outlined all of it, right? So there's how do we find stuff that we need when we need it? How do we make decisions based on, these progressive steps along the way? So the timing aspect to it, right? Yep. So again, kind of what you need when you need it. The when part is extremely important because we all know we start at 30,000 feet and work our way down to a more finely sharp point as we get further along in the process. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in the current process that's completely broken about that, right? We're, as architects, fielding sales calls that are unsolicited. We're getting a flood of emails in our inboxes where they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall because that's the way that it's been done, right? And so no fault to them. They're not salespeople on the manufacturing side are not stepping back and saying, what do architects need from me and when? They're just saying, like, this is how we do it. We sell stuff. And in order to sell stuff, we need to be in their inbox. We need to be on the phone with them all the time. And not stepping back and saying, what do architects need? When do they need it? And how should that process really work? How can I actually serve them instead of selling to them? And that's basically what you're talking about with TechDAP, right?
Yeah. I mean, the magnitude of dysfunction is overwhelming when you really take the time to understand what goes on, right? For the experience of one manufacturer, they might reach out to an architect once a month, once a quarter, let's say. But if an architect is working on, say, 10 projects and each one has a couple hundred products on it, and each manufacturer wants to try to just check in and say, how you doing, right? The experience for the architect is this barrage of incoming, and they just have to reject it, as a matter of time management.
Right.
And for each manufacturer that doesn't understand that kind of buildup by others, they have no idea. And in my experience with manufacturers over the last 20 years, including being a global manufacturer myself and consulting with over 300 other manufacturers, I can confidently say that understanding how architects think, work, and what we need is the weakest link for manufacturers. It's the one thing they know the least about, right? if you're a manufacturer, you need to deal with supply side issues and sourcing your materials and manufacturing and ensuring and distributing and selling, frankly, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you sell your products? You sell them to people that buy them, and architects don't buy them.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that was
Right.
one of the biggest like aha statements that you've made a while back to me. And it was just like, yeah, they're always selling and architects aren't the ones buying. And
Right.
therefore there's this mismatch that's built into this broken system that nobody seems willing to or able to kind of step back and reassess that situation.
Right.
Because they're operating within their own lanes all the time, right? So take what one manufacturer is doing in that barrage of information out to architects, and then multiply that by how many building products get used on a project.
Yeah.
Hundreds, right? So
Yeah.
so now you're actually starting to understand the sea of information that architects find themselves having to wade through time and time again on every single project.
Right.
And that's why you have to have that kind of pruning effect in that just auto delete the emails, because it's
Right.
too much.
Yeah. I think it includes a little bit of a factor of perhaps agriculture, right? It's one thing to grow a nice fruit tree in your backyard, but what if you had to, grow fruit trees on 100 acres? Because everything you do affects the entire deal, right? You're going to do it hundreds of times, not one time.
Right.
And so if we get it right, it can be fantastic. And when we get it wrong, it's a disaster. But the key is that we can just do some very small refinements, right? And that exponential factor of each side of the community, the number of products, the number of manufacturers, et cetera. Let's just agree that right now it's not fun for everyone. But if we could get some of the fundamentals right and everyone were to adopt them, imagine the magnitude of change that we all experience, right?
Yeah.
So it's more about finding better patterns, understanding where people are in the process and what needs to happen for them to be able to find and take the next step that they should. It's not about talking about it. It's not about theorizing anymore. It's about literally just helping those incremental steps happen with a look toward an agricultural mindset of how that crop's going to be looking in maybe 3 years. So a bit of a longer view with immediate action and some deep knowledge of each community and an inclusive process along the way. So it's really an invitation to both sides as much as it is a business, right? I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here to help the health of the conversations. And take, for instance, that communication with architects, right? Manufacturers don't quite understand it, and they're trying to sell to them without recognizing fully that architects are perhaps your best sales lever, right? They just are.
Yeah.
And so even though they're not buying anything, they might be your most powerful partner in your top line sales. And if your top line sales grow, your capital efficiency to the bottom line is even better. So those are some exciting factors that underpin the opportunity. And, the only thing that's happening as an architect myself is I've made this my project, and it's been my project for more than 20 years.
Cormac, I have a question for you, because you're the most practicing architect out of the three of us on projects kind of day to day. And so, the way that I kind of think about it is architects, and correct me if I'm wrong and elaborate on this, is that architects tend to fall into two camps of finding products and components for their buildings, whether it's going to be a facade system or whether it's going to be actual fixtures or anything that goes into a building project. A lot of times we're in one of these two camps, or maybe both of them, right? Is we use what we know because it's been proven, or all that information has already been collected. It's in the spec, like it's already there. So I look at that as stuff I don't have to do again, right? This is that I've already built this. And so a lot of times we become like overly dependent upon that because we just don't want to spend the time looking for new stuff, right? And then there's the other side, which is like, okay, I'm going to find something new for this project because the performance criteria demands it, or because of the location is different than what I'm used to. It could be a number of things. And we go down this like Bob said earlier, this black hole of search, right?
Hmm.
And so you never know where you're going to end up with that. You could end up on a Pinterest page that doesn't ever get you to actual product information.
Right.
You could end up on some manufacturer's website and every one of them's different, right? And you could be kind of scrolling through 100-page PDFs looking for a certain detail, right? So you could just see like how there's so many pathways that the search goes down. And again, you never know where you end up, and you never know where you're going to end up. And there's so many distractions along the way. I like to say that, you never know how you ended up shopping for shoes when you started out on that product search, but you
Right.
did, right? And that's because the sidebar is loaded with ads, and it's made to distract, right? It's made for you
Yeah.
to click on that stuff. And so, from your experience, how do you feel about that? I mean, I think this kind of gets back to that idea of the fundamentals of what this is just putting people in touch with people rather than searching through directories and endless searches or reusing what we already know all the time.
So basically, without knowing about the tech app, a lot of people have been asking me questions about, kind of that very process over the course of the past couple of weeks. It's been a pretty hot topic about, specifications and, right products that are used and things like that. And, what's interesting about the two camps thing is that I would venture a guess to say that a lot of times we start our projects off with in camp one, where most of the time we start to look at our basis of design for the project more of like, okay, we're comfortable with these products that we've used. We know that on the last project it was successful. The last, specs that we wrote, we
Mm-hmm.
liked this product and all that other stuff. And so you kind of start that way. And then as hopefully you start to evolve the design, then you start to say, okay, the last time I used those sliders, they were great, but I have a different performance criteria. And I know that in the past they haven't been able to meet that. I need to start actually taking a look at other products that are, comparable to this design aesthetic that we want, but with a different performance. And a lot of times then it goes off onto the Google searches and just trying to find them. And then, yeah, you're like, oh, look at that. Ooh, I like the way that that looks. But you never really get to get into the meat of like the performance and stuff. And so a lot of times when you reach out to a lot of manufacturers, you do get the sales call and you do say, well, so, oh yeah, well, our product will meet that. And then the more and more you dig into it, when you actually get to like the technical side of it, they're like, well, that product is good for this, but that product is good for that. You're looking for this, and it needs to be that rather than this kind of thing. You're just kind of trying to, get to those quick decisions of like, okay, I like this product, but I need other products, especially a lot of times when we're looking for the approved equals. Um, and a lot of times we as architects like to stack the approved equals in a manner that, okay, I like this product and this product and this product, and that's how I want to stack my specifications. So at the very least in the manufacturers is if you get them the right information that's really conforming to the design aspects and performance aspects that you really want, you're going to be able to get more a good variety of really strong manufacturers in your specifications. So when they're competing, it is an apples to apples rather than an apples and sometimes when you write a spec, you kind of like write it for a very specific one and you kind of like handicap all the other ones. I can't stand that because one of the things that we all know is that none of the none of the projects are always going to have 100% of the products that you want. And so you should be looking for comparables and all that other stuff. And so I'm actually in both camps of it. I
Yeah,
actually
right.
do work on, I kind of started as like, okay, I do have to do a basic design and schematic design because I'm going to have to do a, kind of a schematic design budget. And so I'm going to need to have real dollar, figures to all of those products. So I always kind of go to the tried and truths. And a lot of times I'll say, okay, did this tried and true work for me? Yes. Did we kind of the hardware kind of like, failed on this and all this other stuff. I want to try to stay away from that, but I still like what it's, providing me. What is, option B, C, D, and E, kind of things. And so, I can, there's an interesting soapbox that I could pull out and start standing on and preaching to you guys, because this has been a very strong conversation in the office, and even on my own project team. Kind of, we just did a bid submission, and I was telling Evan, and we finally, like, we started to look at after action views, and it was just like, well, what are some of the things that we should have done differently? And one of the things is make product decisions quicker. It was hands down. It was like literally one of the first things that almost everybody says, like, yes, because we had an idea, and it kept evolving throughout the whole design process and even into construction documentation. And I was just like, if we're able to make bigger decisions, because like sometimes, bad example, but sometimes we'll like get to a product that we like, and then we reach the manufacturer, don't really get good responses, and we're like, it just kind of like drags on, and then you're like, okay, how did we solve that? And we're like, we're not sure yet, and you just like, we didn't solve it because it was too tough of an idea, and we just kind of kicked it down the road. And one of the things, and so one of the things that we we're specifically to like what we're discussing right now is that if we can get more informed decisions a lot quicker, it'll really help us with, I said we should never decide a manufacturer, a product well past DD. You should make that decision at DD and move on, because CDs is just documentation. And the thing is like, well, we're not just, we didn't really look at the right people, or we were sold a bill of goods, or we only got this one, but then we realized that we were really looking into it. It didn't meet the performance criteria and stuff. And the thing that, I find really exciting about, like, the things that I know about TechTap is it's going to be able to get it's going to help facilitate architects to make a decision a lot quicker. And the right ones, the more project specific ones.
Yeah, and I would say it's not even about quicker, although that is, but it's like appropriate timing, right? So it's not like I want to get
we'll use that
all the information all at once, because we all know that's not how it works. But it's like, but where does all that stuff plug in, and how, and it should be based on your needs, right?
Yeah, that brings to mind three things. One, in terms of timing, would you rather get an answer in 15 seconds, or would you rather get the perfect answer even if it took a day or two, right? Because if that manufacturer could truly understand the intricacies of your design intent, maybe they need to go do their own bit of work for you. And come back with the right solution, instead of just giving you what their gut says is the next thing to say, right? So timing, I think, to Evan's point, is appropriate timing. And it's everything from concept stage to post-occupancy. Architects still have questions along the entire spectrum, right? So it's not just about sourcing a product to get it into your package for bid. It's about, hey, I was just proposed 3 alternatives post-bid, or during the bid, and I've got some basic questions. So the questions are, here's the key, are hard to predict, right? So if I'm going to put information on my website as a manufacturer, what questions am I answering already? I don't even know what they're going to be. So that conversation makes a big difference. Another point is that, when we have the opportunity to communicate, and we don't know who to talk to, right? Where do you begin? And so what's ironic to me is that as architects, we probably, when I said earlier that manufacturers' weakest link is that they don't understand us, we probably all went, man, they sure should. Didn't you think that? Didn't you think, like, it sure would be nice if they took the time to understand us? Well, here's the irony. Would you agree that maybe one of the weakest links as architects is that even though our projects consist of real products with performance criteria, cost, availability issues, etc., that one of our weakest links is understanding how to make informed decisions around products?
Hmm.
and understanding
Yeah.
how to navigate that process. Shouldn't we all know exactly how to do that already? And I truly believe it's one of our weakest links. So here is kind of a aha moment that I came across a long time ago when I saw both sides. It's the simple realization that all of the data that might inform answers to our questions are sitting in the hands of the manufacturers. It's already there. It's already known. Cost, availability, et cetera, et cetera. What we don't do is allow those manufacturers to collaborate with us in the process a lot more actively. To recognize that, you know what, don't even try to come up with a good notion of what we think it might be as architects. Just know that all the answers are there. They're fully accessible at no cost. The manufacturers are hoping to have that conversation with us sometime, and we just never make the call. Mm-hmm. So whether there's TechDAP or not, the idea of, hey, I've got a project, I've got some questions or options on products, and let's say that I am thinking of using that door system that I used the last time, but I'm not sure if there might be something different about my next project here. You know, those door guys, they kind of know all the options a lot better than we do.
Yeah.
So before we even decide, should I use that same one or maybe something else? Here's a good example, concrete block. I worked with it for 8.5 years with one of the largest manufacturers in the Western US. Met with hundreds of architects on hundreds of projects. What's your thought on concrete block? Pretty simple product, right?
Yeah.
And most of us would think, you know, it's gray block and we'll either use it for this or that. Did you know there's over 4,000 mixed designs of concrete that are used in concrete block just by this one manufacturer? Do you know that they have over 400 shapes of block? Do you know that distribution-wise, there are certain county lines in certain states above which certain manufacturers supply, below which other manufacturers supply? And that if you're going to change from one to the other, certain mixes aren't even available by the other. And in some instances, they're everywhere. The fact is that there's so much information that you shouldn't even start down that path as an architect. Just ask the question to the source and let them help inform our questions, whether they're extremely broad and general or very specific. You know, the idea of, hey, I've got a public project, I need 3 minimum manufacturers. How easy would it be to call on that block manufacturer and say, who are the next 2 that are reasonable in the market where our project is? Because if I can't include 3, I'm probably going to have to go find another system to use altogether because I can't list just one.
Right.
And so for sure, that manufacturer is going to know who the competitors are, but does that manufacturer understand the necessity of giving you that information so that they can actually be included themselves? Right. So it's a whole series of interesting moving parts that are, again, they're all present. It's just about alignment and understanding and actually empowering each side with the resources that exist on the other and letting them play in our process. So I've been excited as heck about the process. Change, it's just a matter of change is hard, change is messy. And now we're just navigating that and building some tools that make that navigation itself a lot smoother and a lot more intuitive.
So what makes that change? So, well, speaking of change, right? So you've got this platform that architects can now use to engage. But what makes it different? What makes the outcome different, right? So one thing that you've talked about that I'm really excited about is the whole idea behind the Tech Academy and what we're going to do for manufacturers to enable that change so that it's not just more of the same. Like what we don't want to see happen is architects engage and they just get the same kind of sales pitch, right? And so the whole Tech Academy is designed to change that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that's going to work and why you feel like the solution lies in that to actually give manufacturers what they want out of the side of out of their part of the equation as well.
Right. Yeah, I would say it starts with the notion that this is built by architects. You know, we know what we need. And so it's about together informing curriculum, if you will, right? To hand to the manufacturer to say, hey, we want you to go to school on how to better serve us. And we're not going to wait for someone else to write the curriculum or for you on the supply side to write your own curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so the Tech Academy is an opportunity to include our opinions and wishes and preferences on what would you say to a manufacturer if they invited you to help them help you, or for you to help them, you know what I mean? And so the Tech Academy is curriculum by architects to help manufacturers understand those fundamentals while recognizing the needs of the manufacturer. And so it's really an invitation for curriculum content, and I think that's going to be an ongoing process, right? Good thing universities didn't stop with their curriculum development 50 years ago, right?
Right.
Times change. So the content is an ongoing factor, but the fundamentals that have just not been there before are pretty easy to discern and assemble. And so we have a 6-week training available to manufacturers, and it's actually a prerequisite for them to even be on the platform. So one factor in keeping things from returning to the way they've always been on a new platform is that we're actually raising the bar for entry, and we're raising the bar for continued participation. So a couple things. In the academy, we're giving them the fundamentals. They need to complete it, and that gets them in the door to the application. But once they're in, every engagement they have with architects on the platform, architects have the ability to make a note about that engagement. Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? Or was it very helpful? And with just that simple ask at the end of an engagement, there's going to build up this record of how much are they understanding these new rules? Mm-hmm. And those aren't metrics to punish people or to promote people, frankly. Those are just metrics to help navigate the change, right? So if one rep is just constantly getting praises from architects, wow, that was very helpful, right? And you've got a tranche of reps that aren't getting that kind of traction. It's about understanding what are the things that guy's doing or girl's doing that's getting it right, and how do we help transfer some of that knowledge internal to the manufacturing side from one good adopter to others, right? So that whole realm, and that's why I say it's a business that's as much about the human factors of change as it is anything, right? Because we're kind of in that business too. And so we're building metrics and tools to help analyze and nudge over time, higher performance, higher fit, more responsiveness, and a better understanding to, is this actually helping, or is this just a big promotional waste of time, that nobody needs?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all know really well is like we can probably count on our hand the number of sales reps that we trust and we will go to every single time because we get that from them already. But then there's this sea of stuff out there which you could label as opportunity or distraction, depending on how you look at it and where you're at right then. But it's like there's no way that I know what I'm going to get. And so what you're talking about is building consistency in a platform that architects could then trust and then use more, which is a win-win, right, for manufacturers and architects.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned trust, right? That is another pillar of TechDAP. Absolutely. And not just TechDAP. That's another pillar in our industry.
Yeah.
That everybody should take time to better understand, right? No matter who you are. We can self-analyze as architects and ask, how much do we trust the manufacturing community, right? Because if we have a low degree of trust, then we probably have a low degree of engagement with them. But if you knew, like you said, you had a few trusted sources, you're going to call them early and often because they're helpful.
Yeah.
And there's no risk, and you trust them.
Yeah.
You trust them to not call you back asking how the project's going. You trust them to give you straight answers to tough questions, right? So a really significant opportunity and another aha moment is the flip side of this hundreds of products on every project, right? Hundreds of products on every project is a challenge. Well, here's an opportunity. What if every architect had a few a few trusted sources, right? And not deep research, but the average that we've experienced over the decades is less than 10, closer to 8 on average. That just a handful of people do architects really trust. But if each architect trusts, let's say 5 to 10, how many architects are there? In total, how many trusted reps are really out there? An awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing that the platform allows is kind of a peer-to-peer cross-pollination of giving up those short lists of our best folks and sharing those names with others, right? Because if I need 300 trusted sources and I've got 5,
Mm-hmm.
I can either spend the next 20x to get to the 100 myself, or maybe 20 other or 40 other architects have got their own 5 that round out my needs pretty easily.
Yeah, and I think with that specific kind of thinking, it really is about raising the level of the whole profession, where some people will protect those relationships, right? Because I need them to be available when I need them to be available. So I'm not going to let everybody else know about them. That is the complete wrong way to think about it. The right way to think about it is, if you tell this community about your 5 and they tell you about their 5, like, it's this sharing economy that starts to build a community that raises the level of the entire profession going forward. And it's all built on good relationships and trust and sharing of knowledge and getting what you need when you need it. And it really starts to address the fundamental problems that we have just ignored for so long, because this is how we've always done it.
Yeah. And these are subtleties, right? Assessing your degree of trust of supply side manufacturers. That's something that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about, frankly, right? As individuals. But another interesting point about trust and sharing what you know, right? I once wanted to share some information about a fishing hole that a few buddies of mine and I went to. And they're like, dude, don't ever tell anyone about our fishing hole.
Yeah, it's a cardinal
If
rule.
you tell them about our fishing hole, then there will be no more fish pretty soon, right? Well, that's appropriate when there are finite resources, right? But supply side knowledge base is not a finite resource.
Yeah.
What do I gain by not sharing a great rep with someone else? We're not going to run out of information, guys. In fact, just the opposite. The more we do that, the better they will understand which information is relevant when, and they're going to self-organize a little better if they have the opportunity to talk to more of us. And so and then as far as work effort as well, again, if you know 5 trusted sources, then go ahead and plan your own life. How long will it take you to find and develop, another 95 relationships with sources? Just do the math. And is that going to be a fun process? And do you know how to do it easily? Or would you like to have handed to you 95 trusted peer sourced experts like tomorrow? And that kind of nuance is about, the network effect, kind of crowdsourcing, all of the above. But we're applying those principles now to just, again, as you said, improvement of our process and our practice, elevating the profession, elevating things. And then when I hear like a news story about buildings need to be more energy efficient or more resistive to fire, or you name it, right? The whole stock of buildings need to elevate us to a certain thing. A lot of people project that might take decades and decades to make that kind of change happen, right? But imagine how much more thoughtful and higher performance your outcomes could be if you were able to shift really quickly to having far better source access to make far better informed decisions on all of your products. If you did that on your next project, right? And it's hard to do midway on any project. So it's not like shift gears in the middle of your current project. Sometimes a current project, you just have to go, hey, water under the bridge, But the next time, instead of guessing, use the old door system or guess at the next one, just call some door suppliers and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Don't call me back. Answer my question and get the information from the horse's mouth. And if you were to do that, on your next project, imagine how quickly the outcome might be a hell of a lot better, right? And so I think, for instance, one of the solutions to energy efficiency in the world, architects having better access to information in order to make more informed decisions, right? Case in point, I was part of a company that I helped start more than 20 years ago on Wall Street. And we built out an event center with over 300 manufacturers. And I was kind of the developer on the project, co-developer. And my ask was very simple. I asked the manufacturers, what would you put in this space that would showcase your current best products? Simple question. And then in response, we used those best products and we put them all in one place. And by definition, just by that simple ask of each manufacturer, by definition, that space was the most advanced built space on the planet Earth. It was 24 years ago, and we had raised floor environment, underfloor air, fiber optics, bomb-proof server containment, ergonomic everything, sustainable everything, full spectrum fluorescent lights, etc. Because we just asked. The products are already there, actually. The innovations are already happening. And they're not just coming from new sources, they're coming from old sources with new ideas and new products. A lot of those big companies buy the up-and-comers. So another facet of Tech App is to embrace the manufacturing community with two primary focuses, and that is to get all of those mainstay manufacturers that make wood and roofing and glass and other things on the platform, because we still, as much as those are institutional in our industry, we still all have a ton of questions for them that we need help with. And then the other community of source is, who are the people making the innovative stuff? Because as you said, architects want that access as well. And we want to make those findings happen easier and quicker in one place, not 50 places. So we're actually looking at the manufacturing supply side with both of those lenses, attracting the mainstream and really looking for innovation sources so that we can help shorten their path to market, whether they're big or small, and how much resources they have to exist and remain become a lot more tolerable if they have easier access to the community of architects as well, right? So there are a whole lot of economic factors, a whole lot of industry factors at work here, but it's enabled by very subtle, very small moves by each of us.
I wanted to key in on that. We say with TechTap that there's going to be this level of trust, but that's going to be a process on how to get there. And part of that is to have the Tech Academy, which trains sales reps how to serve and what architects need rather than sell. But I think the other big component to that, which you mentioned earlier, was this idea of stealth communications. And Cormac, what I wanted to ask you was, when you are looking for new products, and maybe you're working on a project that you can or can't or don't want to at the earliest stages reveal, right? For various reasons. Like a lot of times an owner requirement is that the project can't be revealed. But then there's other times where it's just like, you don't want somebody doing the runaround on you, right? So, right. Can you talk about what it's been like for you as a project architect and how you do build trust over time? And then kind of taking a step back and saying, well, what if I don't have to do it that way? I can actually do it fully veiled with a system like Tech is offering, and how that might change how you approach finding new things.
So I'll say that two things I always look for when I'm trying to, approach a new product with a manufacturer, and it's access and accuracy. Accuracy, the things that are very specific to the question that I'm asking. I mean, I'm looking for a specific answer, and to be able to get back to me with the right answer goes a long way. And then, I start to realize that I can rely on that person, and I can start to ask them other questions for other projects, this project, whatever. And, and then the access is, they're basically very intertwined. It's finding the right information in a timely manner, but also just feeling like, I'm not just being sold to, I'm actually getting the products that I want and the answers. I mean, because when I'm looking for products, I'm not just looking for, it looks really pretty. I also want to know, ooh, it's going to perform really well.
Performance,
And a
right?
lot of times, people are just saying, well, I can give you this really thing, pretty thing, but never really fully divulge, like the performance aspects that I'm really looking for when I need a product. And
Mm-hmm.
so, the access and accuracy, and then, don't make me feel like I'm being sold to. Make me feel like you're looking specifically at the question that I'm asking.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the stealth mode is that, and yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, even my more current project, for years, I wasn't allowed to even say who it was that I was working for,
Mm-hmm. Right.
let alone, what the project was. And for a variety of different reasons, and all of them were legitimate. But, you know, a lot of times the sales guys look, I really want to just keep focused on that particular project. So when it comes out to bid, I can bid on it. Like, well, you'll know that when, we're allowed to. But
When it's
up until
appropriate.
then, I still need all of this information. And
Right.
sometimes you got to be a lot more forthcoming with just saying, okay, I don't need another project. I just know, I'm working, I need to work with you so that I can, actually have that shot to bid on it later on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like functionally, mechanically in the app, you can give your project a known as name, which can be whatever you want,
Right.
which helps you track this kind of collaboration with manufacturers, getting information that you need when you need it and keeping it in that place. And what that allows is you to talk about this as a subject and remove the pieces of the information that maybe aren't appropriate to talk about yet, which is, I think it's kind of two things that, if I put myself in a manufacturer or sales rep's shoes, I'm looking for what's the project? Like, how juicy is it? How big is it?
Right, exactly.
Who's the client? If I don't know project information, who's the client, right? But then also, what's your domain name that you're coming from as an architect? Is it one of the big H firms, right? Is it an HOK? Is it a SOM? Is it a ASG? Is it what is it? And that also helps kind of fill in some gaps about the potential of that project and how much they might want to pay attention to it. What I like about this is it levels the playing field, right? It says every architect gets equal access because all they want as all of them together is information, right? It doesn't matter how big or how small.
Right.
And it works the other way too, right? It's like, now as an architect, I can go in there and I can look for stuff by an up and coming because it fulfills the requirements that I need. And it gives them equal access on the platform as a giant manufacturer, right? Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool, I think, in a way that it levels the playing field across the board to make it where, what is this really about? It strips back the conversation to just getting people the information that they need. And then these manufacturers are competing on that performance of getting you the information that you need, right? Yep. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and from the manufacturer side of things, as you're saying, so the architect's going out there and they're looking for, one thing. And so with the manufacturers, a lot of times, sometimes I've had experiences in the past where they're like, oh, that's not, big enough of a project, or that's not important enough of a project. I love the opportunity to just kind of take that out of the factor, and they'll just say, I'm just going to give you information. Because then you say, okay, I've never really used these people before, but they definitely fit the bill. And they're fine, they're talking to me, and so you can take that information and you can have, these informed decisions, rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to go to this, the one stop shop that I always go to because I know they're going to give me the information. And, nobody's really forthcoming with their information. Now that everybody's forthcoming with their information, it not only opens up, a lot more trusted partners for us, but also for them, because they're, now I'm going to have access to that HOK or SOM project, or whatever, without ever knowing it, because, if they give the architect the time of the day, then then the architect's like, okay, exactly.
They can make a decision, right? It gets them to a decision faster. So, okay, this is a vehicle to build trust. And so, Bob, can you just talk about where did that idea come from, And
Yeah.
how do you see it playing out ultimately? Because again, like we can't just say there's going to be trust. Trust is a process that people
Yeah.
go through developing through building these relationships, and
Sure.
the benefit it's going to benefit both sides. So maybe you can talk about that whole spectrum.
Absolutely. It was all of this comes from firsthand experience and conversations with my peers, right? So we've all had the conversation, we've all had the experience that we just don't want manufacturers calling us when we don't need to talk with them. Simple concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So everyone would think, wouldn't it be nice if they didn't do that? Well, we have two options. They entirely change their ways and just stop calling, or we have a way for them to not call us. Okay. And so, to the point of projects, for instance, their habit is to chase projects, right? That's what they do. They want to know what the project is, when it's going to bid, et cetera. I literally read an article this morning in a business journal about a hospital project. And it's actually a hospital. My daughter is a nurse. And that project is breaking ground later this year. It's almost a $4 billion project. They expect occupancy in 2030.
Wow.
There are renderings of the project. They're breaking ground this year. How many product decisions are already made as far as systems and choices and bids and relationships? How many unnecessary calls are there going to be in the next 9 years of companies reading about the journal article this year or 5 or 7 years from now and going, hey, let's go get into that project, would you?
Too little, too late.
Make
right?
the call, make the call, make the call.
Yeah.
So those are some of the kind of reasons that kept poking me to try to solve that question. And the answer is stealth communication. Simply providing a really impenetrable veil between me and whoever I want to ask a question to, where I don't have to tell them who I am or what I'm working on.
And this gets me really excited because this is like a total technology solution, right?
It's a technology solution, right? And that's the point, is that conceptually we all want that. Hey, where's the veil I could just walk around in as an architect and not have people even know I'm there, right? I want the answers. I got to call you. We got to talk.
It's that
but if I call you,
cloak that we all want when we see it in the movies.
So we
right?
needed a technological development or a technology development to build that stealth cloak. And that's what we've done. And we're not the first to do it, right? We'd be a little, myopic to think that these are issues we have. So the beauty of technology is that every corner of the world and every facet of business has been pretty well developed. We just happen to be the slowest profession to adopt most of that, frankly, right? So what we've stitched together are some fantastic solutions, and in those pairings, created some new challenges and questions that we had to navigate with the developers of these other platforms. And so we are working in beta mode on some really cool things with some really cool suppliers, including CSI, right, on master format. And how better to make that happen? I mean, if you print out the PDF of just the master format, it's almost 750 pages.
Oh my gosh.
Literally. That's just the outline.
Yeah.
150 pages of which is a keyword index to navigate the other 600 pages of outline. I mean, ridiculous. We need technology to navigate these things, and CSI is doing a fantastic job with tools like Crosswalk and other things to make that easier for us. But that doesn't address stealth, right? Mm-hmm. But it's part of it. Like if I need a stealth solution that can allow me to put in a couple keywords to find the right person with whom to have a stealth communication, well, that's a piece of it. But the actual veil is yet another supplier and another process. And so the TechDApp is a collection of very specific technology woven together to achieve that outcome. So for users, we simply put in a keyword, find the right folks to talk to, engage either a call or a chat. Email is a little tougher to veil. You can do it, but it's a little tougher.
Your domain name's attached to it. It is harder.
Yeah, or if you take the Craigslist approach where you anonymize your email, etc. I don't know how many of you have seen that, by your fourth anonymous response in Craigslist, it's actually showing them your full email.
Yeah.
It just like degrades the process because it's really hard to control two sides on an uncontrolled platform for very long. But a phone call is a phone call and a chat's a chat. And so we have the ability to anonymize both sides. But there's only benefit to anonymizing the architects. We want those folks, the supply side, to tell us who they are, know who they are, et cetera. But they can't call you back. In fact, what we did enable is a tool that allows the manufacturer to ping you back, right? So if I make a call to a source and they're not available and I have to leave a message, how do you do that? How do you do that without them calling you back?
Right.
So you leave a message, they get a ping invitation. So they're allowed to ping me back and say, hey, I missed your call. Or, hey, I got your message and here's your answer, via chat. Again, anonymously, sent to an anonymous source, but it sent nonetheless. But if they want to talk to you or follow up on your call, they get the invitation to ping you back. So as an architect, you leave the message. A minute later, 5 minutes later, a day later, you get a ping. And that source is saying, hey, got your message, ready to talk when you are. That's it. That's all they can do. So now when I decide, I can reach back out to them in stealth mode and make that call. Why? Because I might be in a meeting. I don't want them calling me back at 9:42 a.m. Tuesday, right? I want to talk to them, but I don't want them to know who I am, and I want to call them when I'm ready.
Right.
So things like that are built into the platform. We're eliminating the hassle. We're enabling the connections. We're delivering the cloaks of anonymity, et cetera, and just basically taking care of the small details that we all want, but none of us would have the resources to build individually, right?
Yeah.
And so we're putting those fundamental pieces in a collection of subparts to the tool set that just enable users to do what they wanted to do all along. And that's use your phone, use your computer. If you spend most of your time on your desktop, it works there. If you are mobile and on the run and super lean, and that's the way you prefer it, works there. It works on your phone, on a tablet, on a desktop, etc. And it's global, high security technology. There's no loose ends here.
And ultimately in the service of building trust and verifying performance, right? So over time, if you decide after a day that you want to open it up and let them know who you are, you can. Or
Sure.
if you want to wait a year to do that, because then that's the appropriate timing.
Yeah.
Or they have shown that the reciprocation of getting you the information you need when you need it and playing by the rules, and they've built that trust. Like ultimately,
Right.
You can just open it up and lift the veil, and the communication is there, and now we know who each other are, and we could go other routes of communication that are more appropriate for different phases of a project, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah, you mentioned the word verify. Yeah, that brings up another couple thoughts. So one is verify. One of the risks that manufacturers have in a platform like this, and they've voiced it pretty strongly, is how do we know that these are actually architects that are stealth behind a veil asking us these questions? And how do we know they're not our competitor? Right? If I'm their competitor, give me a veil. Let me ask them questions without them knowing I'm their competitor. Hey, how much does that cost?
yeah.
Who are your competitors and what do you think about them? So verification is a really important process. So user authentication. Yeah. Just like we want to know that a manufacturer has gone through the Tech Academy, we want to know if you're actually in the design industry or if you're a competitor to manufacturers, right? And so we have a couple requirements for engagement on the platform. I stated some of those requirements and prerequisites for manufacturers, but for architects, it's a really simple thing. We just need to know that you're who you say you are. That's it. One time. So we don't need you to enter our site through gated entry every time, and we're going to ask you all these questions all the time. No, just help us authenticate who you are once, and that way we eliminate the risk for the manufacturers, right? Because as you were talking about verifying the context of verifying their trustworthiness over time, right? And validating and growing their degree of trustworthiness, right? But validation of users is a key piece. There was another thought I was going to articulate or expand on, and it's gone. So
It's
it might
gone.
show up again.
That's normal.
Yeah, I have holes in my system too. So
Well, maybe we can start to wrap up, and I have a last, maybe potential last topic, and I would love to get your feedback on this, Cormac. Is okay. So let's say that this transfer of information along this timeline of a project is recorded, right, inside of this. So if you've got chats, and you're going to be making decisions based off those chats, and you're gonna on a project be talking to lots of different people as an architect, engaging with a lot of different people on this platform. And so when you set up that original project and you give it a name, you're basically creating like a folder of a repository of a place to put stuff. So Cormac, when you're working on a project right now, how do you memorialize these decisions? Obviously, they end up, the real decisions end up in the spec at the end. But along the way, right, as decisions get made, you tell me how many places, how many data silos that stuff could live in. Like the way I think about it is, okay, we talk in Teams, we talk in Zoom, we talk in email, we talk in chat. In some cases it's a phone call, some cases a video call, some cases it's a chat. You've got OneNote, like you've got a plethora. I hate that word, but it's there, right? Like so talk about the whole, like where do we keep track of these decisions? We've talked about a document set being a set of decisions, right? And so where do these decisions along the way live for you guys, and where do you see an end to that?
Well, so we actually try to simplify it. We were setting up our project tree folder of all the different, things that we're, pulling in information, whether it's existing information or whatever. We'll actually develop a project manual folder. And in that project manual folder, we'll have a products folder. Inside that products folder, we basically break it down through divisions of the specs.
Yeah. Right.
In each of those division 8, whatever we want to call it, we'll go in there and we will kind of start to dump in our research. And so we'll have a products folder, and then we'll have a final folder. The final folder will be this everything is going to be, most of all of our work is all basis of design type, factory. And so the final one will be the basis of design that we are going to be building to. And so that's how we're going to write our specs around. All of the other ones are research that we don't want to throw away because it's good, valuable research that we might use somewhere else, or it might be an approved equal or whatever. But, we at least have, in that division 8, we're, specific to that particular specification section, we're going to, pull in all of the different things. If we go in and we're doing glazing, we're going to look at all the different glazing manufacturers. We're going to find that final glazing manufacturer, but then we're going to use all of this other one as research for other people, because we also try to make it available for other people to use. We are passing along information. It's like, hey, I'm looking for birch strip glazing. Okay, well, here's all of the information that I've done research-wise, interface with a lot of different manufacturers. Here's the manufacturers' names. Here's the product, data and information that we need. And here's the, and then here was our final selection based off of, the criteria that we were really looking for. But if you're looking for something else, here's this, but then here's all of this other information that we found. And so we kind of make it, we try to streamline it so that we aren't like throwing it in all these different ones. I mean, yes, we're communicating back and forth via email and chat and, Teams and Zoom and OneNote, specifically for me, where we'll have this, memorializing the conversation, but we need to, memorialize it in a far simpler way when we're actually, kind of like just saying, this is the product we're using.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I hear when, as a, from a digital practice side of things, is just how do you surface information, right? Like, how do you actually find later And that is the hardest part because number one, like were the people working on the project disciplined enough to put it in the right place? Okay,
Right. Yeah.
let's just say they
Yeah.
were, right? Let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Number two, 3 years from now, when you send a junior designer into a folder structure to look for a product that you used on that project over there because you liked it, and they don't know a division number because they're not trained in that yet,
Right.
that becomes like an hour-long search, right? And so to me, like again, assuming it's in the right place, assuming it's named appropriately, assuming somebody clouded the page in the PDF of the product you actually decided to use, et cetera, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera,
Right.
that is a deep, deep hole that information
Well,
lives
true.
within. And there's so many ways it can go wrong. So to me, I think one of the, bringing it back to one of the things that TechDAP is trying to do is just say, here's your project. Here's the decisions you've made on the products that you've decided to collaborate with manufacturers on for this project. And then teammates can just dig through there and have one place to find that stuff and not hope to find it in the folder structure versus the OneNote versus the email versus any of the other places
Right.
that
Right.
could
Right.
possibly be. So
Yep.
maybe Bob, you could just explain how that works and then what an architect could do with that data, because maybe they want to memorialize it in an archive at the end. What can they actually do with it and not to get it back out of TechDAP?
Sure. Yeah, the beauty with digital platforms is the ability to move that data or group that data or search, sort, and filter, right, by various attributes. And so even one product inquiry or one conversation has a number of factors involved with that conversation. What was the project? What was the stage of the project? What was the type of the project? What was the question? Who was the company? What was the outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so built into the application is an organization platform for all of the data where you can actually sort by project, sort by search, right? Because if I'm making a search using keywords to find a certain product genre, yes, that's tied to a project, but wouldn't it be nice to just revisit that search, but maybe it's in a different project location, right? So repeating the process every time is how our industry does it right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? In a very repetitive blocking and tackling in silos of context. This project, this product, in this location, right? And yet, master format is going to be involved in every project.
Right.
Systems and support suppliers are going to be involved on all of the various projects, et cetera. So, the platform includes a very smooth organizing platform for all of your chats, calls, searches, projects, products, and experts. So product experts, not only do you engage with them, but you can favorite them, right? So that you've got your own private list of favorites. If I need to change project location and that's the only thing changing, let's say I've got a repeat client, right? That I'm doing projects for across the country. I don't want to research everything. I just need to change my location, and I need new contacts for that.
Right.
Because codes are different. Regionalism is real, and so, and really impactful, right? Code, sourcing, everything, cost, labor,
logistics.
If I'm developing in San Francisco, my permit fees and road closures and things are a lot different than in the middle of Kansas. So, but the ability to organize and search and structure that data is automatic. It's built in so that you don't even think about it. It's there. As far as exporting into project files like the one you described, Cormac, it's all exportable, right? So if I need that full chat thread or just a summary of the chat thread or my call notes or an expert's profile, detailed profile with the contact info and everything, I just export it as a PDF. So everything exports as a PDF, print it, throw it in a file, send it digitally to someone else on the team, et cetera. That's built in as well. Because again, we're architects. We know that this is what we need and how we need it.
Right.
So organization and kind of crowdsourcing, I think, are something to really understand. take for instance, you do schools, but you haven't done a school in St. Louis, but other school architects in St. Louis have. Okay.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice if you can just put in your project location? Sorry, got a attack dog on me. Put in your project location and be fed information from other similar searches by architects on a similar project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Or if I've not done a school before and it's my first school, wouldn't it be nice to see the master format tree that's used on average for schools in that area and just be able to select or deselect a few items and localize the search in one click based on city or location?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
what's interesting is I just had a request from someone who was looking for my Rolodex of preferred manufacturers.
What's a Rolodex, Uncle Cormac?
Exactly. I told him like, just hold on a minute, hold on,
Is that a candy bar or a candy? Rolo. I've heard of it. I think I've heard of it. A Rolo deck.
It was because they, I told them, I was like, be patient because there is something out there that it's going to be so, it's going to be a game changer because the fact that, we do, that our particular firm, we do a lot of projects in a variety, in every municipality. I mean, we've done I don't think there's a state that we haven't worked in. And so, the great thing about it is that, yeah, I may have a preferred vendor for the Baltimore area, but I have done projects in St. Louis. And I know that, doing projects in St. Louis, there are different, manufacturers that do cross that line. And, so if I do have somebody who's preferred here, do they actually work somewhere else? And it's kind of exciting to actually be able to like have something that you guys can go to that actually kind of like takes this laborious task of trying to find a new set of like players for like my preferred materials and stuff like that, and it makes it a lot easier for you to access stuff like that. And so that Rolodex of like the one card that of this guy, you call this guy and this guy calls this guy and stuff like that. But since they're already in a chain, you can just say, okay, I like this manufacturer, let me see who's there in that particular place. And I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I misled you guys earlier because I said that maybe we could start wrapping up, and now you've just opened up another thing that I definitely wanted to kind of quickly touch on, which is, we talked earlier on about architects making informed decisions and how this kind of endless sea of searching. Cormac, you talked about, you send off looking for one thing, you end up finding other stuff that may or may not work. And then in this last piece of the conversation, we started talking about regionalism, right? And so we started talking about the impacts that there are that are legit impacts. And there's also stuff that only works in certain regions. We're not just talking about logistics, right? So again, I want to start with you, Cormac, and then go to you, Bob, which is, Cormac, how many times have you gone off on a search to find something you really like, only to find out that it will never work in the location that your project is based on?
Well, unfortunately, too many times, to be quite honest with you. And in fact, actually, a project that I was doing down in North Carolina, some of the more useful things that I like to go to in the Mid-Atlantic in, Northeast region just don't work. And they're not applicable to the application in North Carolina. And so, some of the things, so many times I had, is just like, oh, we don't do that here. It's like, okay, I wish I would have known that, during my design phase things. Now I'm learning about it in submittal process.
Well, and a lot of times that's because you're looking for information and maybe you can or can't find it, and you're making a decision without a rep's involvement because you don't want to do that, right? That's a waste of time.
Exactly.
only to find out later, like if you would have only engaged with them, they could have told you that information immediately. So
exactly.
It's a mess.
Yeah. Because then the irresponsibility of me, saying that, I selected this this manufacturer, but they don't work there, and now we're having to during construction do that. And we know that substitutions aren't a one-for-one exchange of
Yeah.
finances. And so,
Right.
if I would have known that ahead of time, now I saved myself a lot of grief and the potential embarrassment in front of the client that, I didn't know that, this door manufacturer didn't work in this area.
Well,
Right.
and if you think about it from the manufacturer side, they're missing out too now, right?
Exactly.
Because they don't get to put that product on that project because it won't work, right? So,
Right.
Bob, tell us how TechDAP is solving this particular problem.
It's one of the bigger problems that needed to be solved for sure, for a number of reasons. I'll touch on those and I'll try and answer it from both sides. First, from the architect's perspective, and then from the manufacturer, because the impacts are tremendous. Fortunately, the solution is really simple. Okay. But let's start with the architect's experience. One of the challenges we have when we inquire about any product, particularly if we use the resources that are available to our industry, things like magazines, websites, trade shows, any kind of promotion that you'll look into, a lot of the continuing education sources, right? Where I can go and continue to learn about products. All of that coursework, all of the promotions, all of the platforms that share that information to our industry. Let's just talk about the United States. It lacks regionalism.
Yeah.
Right? I was
It's
with the
applied
company for a
equally,
long
right?
time. It's
Yeah.
applied equally. And so if I get Architect Magazine and I thumb through it and I see something that I really, really want, then maybe I just really, really want that on my project.
Yeah.
And if I call the number, or if I fill out the card at the back of the magazine, or if I go online and enter my information to wait to get the response, but however I do it, if I get that information and I engage that manufacturer and I say, hey, I'm working on something I just told you about, this big $1 billion project in California, and I've got some questions, they're going, yeah, we can do that.
Mhm.
Sure. They've
All
never
they heard
sent
was the
anything
billion.
west of Mississippi, ever, but we
Right.
can do that. We can do that. Sure. They have no approvals in California. They have no understanding of the energy code nuances. They have, no appreciation for the fact that when it comes time to, source and acquire that product, no contractor is going to willingly pay the freight as a non-factor. You know what I mean? And you talk about egg on your face.
Right.
The projects that we've worked on in schools, in public schools in California, right? Like, does it have the testing criteria requirement done? And there's so many materials and things that an architect wants to use on a project, and the manufacturers don't even understand that these testing requirements have to be not only done but reported, right? And basically, it has, like, DSA requires that information for it to even be considered, right? And so they have to do all the fastener testing, for instance. And so again, like, you go off searching for something, and there's no checkbox for this works with DSA in California.
Right. And that would just take a lot of forethought and planning and automation and data structure and algorithms to make that simple, right?
Yeah.
But why not just talk to people?
Yep.
Hey,
Yep.
do you guys understand the criteria for the city of Los Angeles approvals? And they're like what? And it's like, yeah, that's a big no. They have no idea.
Exactly. There's your red flag. Run.
I don't need to do for some system to tell me whether they check the box or not. I could say with confidence they have no idea. So my next question would be, who do you know in California that you can refer me to, for instance? But getting back to regionalism for architects for a minute, we look at our industry sources and publications, and again, there's just no regional way of knowing who's available for my project that also meets the criteria of my design intent and my schedule and budget, right? Multiple factors around the same topic of regionalism, because maybe something is available in my region, but it's 4x my budget. So it's really not an option for this project, right? It's not just about geolocating. It's about multiple factors. So we do have algorithms that take those factors into account and make it easy. That's part of it. But for the architect, the regionalism, most of it is dependent on the build side, right? And there's a lot of local knowledge. We talked about St. Louis. It's not just which manufacturers supply there, but which manufacturers are contractors equipped with labor and familiarity to actually do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's regionalism and cultural familiarity in the region of your project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And cultural preferences and norms in the region of your project. If we wanted to build with Adobe in the Southwest, that's not a problem. If we want to build with Adobe in the Northeast, it might be a different set of conversations, right? And expectations and constraints.
It could be Adobe-like.
Right? And it's all out there. No Adobe included in the content of the material whatsoever, but it's Adobe-like.
Yeah.
But so for the architect, it's a constant challenge, and it's baked into every inquiry we make. We just literally don't know if they meet all the criteria locally, but we all find out whether it does or not when it gets to bid and decisions are made. And at that point, it's a massive exposure of embarrassment for us along the way, right? And it adds to the problem of the build side looking to the design side saying they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, look at how easy it is to know that product is only available on the East Coast, not here.
Right.
Like, what was your architect thinking? Well, it's not that we're incompetent. It's that our resources didn't empower that kind of knowledge well enough. And we could challenge the build side with as many, challenges as they can throw at us. The point is, hey, folks, we're on the same team. We're not trying to make it hard for the architects or the builders, but the manufacturers, like the piano player in the bar, they're involved on both sides of the conversation. So it's far better for architects to know who's regional in the first place. That's going to radically improve your batting average for keeping your product and design intent through completion of the project and not get changed out in the 11th hour, right? And it's just going to not have you have to go figure those things out. It's already regionalized. For the manufacturers, boy, is that an interesting topic for them. Do you know which manufacturers supply to more than 5 states? How would you know?
Yeah, right.
like what metric would you conceive of using if you had all the resources available? How would you figure that one out? You wouldn't, but they know. And so it's about having a platform that invites that level of granular knowledge. And it's not just like, again, I refer to companies I've worked with. Take the block company, right? They don't just make block. In their collection of companies, they make over 27,000 different product SKUs for the building industry. Even inside the company, like in Northern California, if your project is far Northern California, like almost to Oregon, it's not even supplied by their plant in Northern California. It's supplied by their plant in Nevada. Why? Well, because the logistic corridor is far better, at least, it's far better to source from Nevada than from the Northern California plant. Okay, how would I know that? My project's in Northern California. Yeah, I picked from your Northern California plant palette. Yeah, but those products aren't available up there unless you pay some surcharge. You know what I mean? So the point is that regionalism, when you look at the manufacturing part, what product, how is it distributed? Some things are sold direct to contractors. Some are sold through distributors. Like a lot of brick products, clay brick products are sold through distributors. A lot of concrete products are sold through distributors and direct to contractors. How would you know that as an architect? You don't. So the way we streamline the regionalism question for architects is to help manufacturers tell the platform exactly who they are, where they would like to supply with primary relevance and profitability, right? Because if I'm a manufacturer in the Southeast and I've determined that my numbers make sense, 2 states to the west, but not beyond that, then I really don't even want to be included in projects and inquiries and wasting our time where we're really not even going to make money at the end of the day. It's probably going to be a big headache for us, where we find out late that all that effort and we don't meet the criteria of that neighboring state, et cetera. So finding the sweet spot is simply about understanding where the information is best sourced, and it's frankly from the manufacturers, right, down to the expert. here's another quick facet from the manufacturer side. A manufacturer may have 100 sales reps across the US. Is every sales rep the kind of expert that we want to talk to?
Right.
Like
right.
if the sales rep in LA, because my project is in Los Angeles, is who they're telling me to call, and you've got 100 reps, is the guy in LA really the guy I should talk to, or is he just the located guy I should talk to? So the other thing we're doing with manufacturers is we're helping them understand that just because you have 100 sales reps, it does not mean you have 100 people that are qualified to help architects, right? Architects want answers from experts, period. Mm-hmm. So we're actually helping manufacturers that may have 100 territories with 100 salespeople, and we're compelling them to actually consider that they may only have 10 experts in that mix.
Yeah.
Those are the people that we need on the platform. So now rep number 5, who only handled LA, might actually take all the inquiries in the Western region. Why? Because architects want experts, right. Regionally. And how would we know that the rep number 5 out of 100 was the actual expert to talk to? How would that guy's front office know that he was actually the guy that we want to talk to, mm-hmm. right? So the complexity of regionalism is pervasive in our impacts, and it needed to be solved. And that has taken years to figure out on our end, and years to put together the solution set. And now it can be solved in a matter of months of input by specific manufacturers into that network.
Yeah, what's beautiful about that is that it takes all of like that, like you the way you positioned all that was it's opaque to the architect.
As and what you're saying, be, right? We don't care.
What you're saying is it still gets to be, right? Like they don't, but it gets them what they're looking for much more accurately without even having to worry about that part of it. Cormac, well, sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, there's two other factors to regionalism that this actually helps the architects solve. And, one of them is, okay, and I like the fact that you put it this way, is a product actually available in your area? Because a lot of times if we're, say, building in the Baltimore area, I'm just, going to use that as my specific, and, but I want, a certain product. Is that product available in Baltimore? Well, that has an overreaching, factor of two. Is like, okay, if it's going to have to conform to a sustainability factor, and they don't, I don't have anything regionally. Is it going to be coming outside of that 500-mile, bubble? And if it says, well, yeah, okay, well, maybe I need to start looking at other products because, every product now has, or every project now has a level of sustainability that they need to conform to. The city of Baltimore, the project I just recently submitted on, we're following the LEED tract, and the LEED tract, materials have X criteria that you have to follow. And finding out, being able to find out if that product is actually available regionally is a big factor in determining whether or not you're going to use that product. And even more so is if you can find out from the manufacturer, okay, I want to use this project, this product on my project. However, my client wants to see this product. Can you tell me, where another installation of this is, so I can, arrange some kind of tour for my client so they can see it in action, because they may not have ever used this before. Now I can show them, what I'm trying to achieve for them.
It's not so scary anymore if they can touch it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And so being able to have access to, that project in a more regional fashion, or that product in a more regional fashion, is definitely something that is of use in the kind of like the regional aspect of easing the architect's mind.
Yeah. One other quick reference on the regionalism side of things and the resources that we access as an industry regularly. When I started digging into this and I really started understanding who the regional sources are and were as manufacturers, and then I looked at the mainstream resources online and otherwise, and I put those queries in, many of the most prolific suppliers in certain regions weren't even showing up. Like they weren't even showing up. So, using concrete block again, there are some companies that provide certain regions where like 90% of the time it's just one company.
Hmm.
And when I search the mainstream databases in those regions for that product type, the company doesn't even come up. I mean, how disabling is that to the
You won't even,
process?
never get the job, right?
When I never even knew the most relevant. So now put yourself in the shoes of the manufacturer again.
Right.
How many projects are they missing?
Yeah.
Right.
When
right.
they say, hey, 90% of the time our product is used in that region, well, only about 10% of the people even know that you exist.
Wow.
Because
Right,
90% of the time they're searching resources that don't include you,
Right. Right.
and you are not getting invited to the party. So from a manufacturer's perspective, isn't a great goal for them that wherever their footprint is, however complex it may be, that whenever there's projects in that specific footprint, at least they're in the consideration
Yeah.
for
Totally.
all projects in that region where their product is being called on?
Yeah. It helps
Right.
everybody. Yeah.
Right.
It's a ridiculous efficiency that has lacked a solution for decades, right?
And you just,
Back in the
as an
old day when it
architect,
was, I'm sorry, Evan, but quick point. Back in
Yeah.
the old day when you had to move all of your products by horse and and carriage or horse and cart, you knew what regionalism was and who the players were.
yeah.
Right.
We just
right.
don't live in that day.
Right.
So it's a
What
little
I was-
different challenge.
What I was going to say was, the way that the information is presented to architects online, especially, is that, and I guess in the magazine is a great example too, is that it
Yeah.
all works everywhere, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Exactly.
there's no specificity to that,
Mhm.
but you assume that because your eyeballs see that thing, that it works, like that it should be available, and that's just
Yeah.
not the case. And the way that you just laid out how complex that really is phenomenal problem to solve, and by taking that off the table and making it a key part of, let's call it the algorithm, even though
it is. On a certain level it is, and on a certain level it's just a fundamental that needed a whole tool set
right.
and logic to unravel and to reposition and to reconnect and then to prove it out, right?
Yeah.
And to make it work. And we're actually, just a quick note, we're in beta, right? This isn't a product that's like launching off the shelves to market and everything's dialed and all the suppliers are there, et cetera. So all of the work to date was intense and complex, fully informed, not fully, but highly informed, right? From both sides of the puzzle, architecture and manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're actually in beta mode with full invitation from both sides to help us further refine the outcomes.
Yeah. And to me, that's what's the most exciting opportunity about this is that invitation to make things better, to actually solve these problems and not proliferate the existing problems in just a new way to access that information.
Yeah. I hope that we're the least informed at the end of the day, and that the crowdsourced additional knowledge proves to be the group genius that the full turnkey solution, is going to include. One other quick reference on regionalism that's just an interesting thing that most of us probably have never thought about. As a manufacturer, we put up a continuing education course on a national resource.
Mm-hmm.
And I offered a course for energy strategy in California. Okay. The platform it was posted on was a national resource. The course was downloaded and completed by more than 500 architects. Only 5% were in California.
Mm-hmm.
So 95% of those folks who took the course, didn't really know initially that it was entirely about California. It was about concrete block and energy strategy, et cetera. I have to imagine that a good portion of those folks are never going to do a project in California.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have just wasted a bit of their time because it was so California specific. But there was no way to say, and I literally asked the platform provider, I said, I see this as an issue. Is there any way we can just promote it as a regional course?
Mm-hmm.
They said, yeah, we don't do that. Well, that's just one example from one course on one product in one state. Imagine how much of a quagmire that is. On every topic. When I go online, I take a course and they say, nope, it says that I don't need any insulation. for this system in this state because of something. And somebody in New York tries to use that data. Like I took the course,
Right.
Anyway, there's some stuff there that needs attention, and we're just trying to do it, and we're at the front end of the next step, which is beta and involvement and dialogue and participation by others. And really happy to have been given the opportunity to talk to you guys about this, and share the invitation to your audience as well.
Yeah, I know that we've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and I think we really should wrap it up now.
Sure.
One of the kind of key wrap up points that I think is worth talking about, and then Cormac, I would invite any of your thoughts, and Bob, maybe you can wrap it up and let everybody know where they can find out more information about this and stuff like that. But the last point that I will make is that we've talked a lot about this on the various channels, right? It's taking a step back and leading a solution for everybody to get better together, and really saying that we are all in this together. Like this is something that we need to do by us, for us, and solve our own problems, and not wait around for somebody else to hopefully solve it for us, but really rolling up our sleeves and getting our hands dirty to solve this problem for us so that we can spend this time on better things, right? That is a key thing that I see happening here. And it's worth pointing out that no one manufacturer could do this on their own, and no one firm could do this on their own. It really takes like that agnostic party to apply this to everybody and say, like, we're not just providing it to you. We're inviting you in. You can be a part of making this solution for everybody. And so that's to me what's most exciting about the ability for this to elevate the conversation, but also elevate the profession that we all are so passionate about.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like this is something that's filling a need that most people realized that there was a problem, but wasn't really sure of how to solve it, because it's just easier to kind of continue to keep doing things kind of status quo, and it's just like, well, this is just the way that, I mean, as many times as we approach a project where we're like, okay, well, this is just we're going to use this because this is how we've done it in the past and things like that. And that just kind of perpetuates the issue. And the thing about this is that, and we've talked about this in numerous different platforms, but just this conversation of, where do you want to spend most of your brain power? Like going out and searching 5,000 different products, or do you want to like find the right product and then get back to like what you really want to do, which is like that whole design process?
And now multiply that across every architect.
Exactly.
How much time is seriously wasted? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Exactly. And, and so we like get back the part of the projects that you really love to do, rather than, we talk about the mundane process. Well, it's not really mundane if you like just let it. Yeah. You know what I'm getting.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I'm super excited about is that I'm now on this team and really attacking this from the architect side, and that's why the preamble that I just gave about being excited about creating something for the profession's betterment is so exciting to me to be a part of that. But I definitely don't want that to be what this conversation was about. I want it to be about how people now can get involved and know that they have somebody that they can come talk to about that and get this conversation like out in public.
Yeah, to make it very clear, we are blessed to have Evan Troxel on board full-time at TechTap Inc., leading our architect community efforts. And it's just a natural fit, right? And I would say that you, Evan, are just an early adopter of the invitation, right? You jumped in a little bigger than most could even have the opportunity to, perhaps. But the idea of us rowing in the same direction, getting in the same boat, doing things that make sense together. Right? The whole point of TechDAP maybe we could say is just to give architects more time in their lives.
Yeah,
to do the things they want, to your point, Cormac. And maybe that's not even more work on projects, right? Just maybe it's more time to grow and travel. But firstly and profoundly, I'm deeply humbled and excited as heck to have you on the team, Evan. I'm even more excited about the prospect of having dozens, if not hundreds of other architects really join the effort.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that I could see that if you as an architect listening or participating is willing to spend a couple hours of your life on this effort, that might be all it takes. Mm-hmm. For us to be able to deliver back to you, in service to you, the kind of tools and solutions that you've been needing and hoping for every day, frankly, right? So that's the goal. That's the invitation. And, we're just hopeful about the future. And so we're in beta. We're launching Monday, a couple of days from this recording. And techapp.com is the entry point. So check it out. Let us know if you're interested. Keep an ear to the ground because we've got a pretty robust strategy and a pretty aggressive schedule of growth. But we are going to be cautious. So I could see iterating and improving happening on an every couple of weeks schedule for probably the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's what it's going to take to get really, really strong and better than average. But coming out of the gate, I've been at this since kind of early 90s. And it's been an iterative process, and it's been improving and building. And right now we've assembled it in a super potent offering. And so for early adopters, we welcome you in. We'll be in service to you at no cost other than a little of your time up front and validating that you are who you say you are. And beyond that, there's just work to do, and we're just excited as heck to be doing it. So again, I thank you guys both for the opportunity to talk about this on your show, and Evan's choice to change his life and join the party.
I couldn't be more excited to make a huge impact, make a positive impact on our profession. And that's really something that I feel passionate about. And I feel like it was the irresistible opportunity to do just that and to build the community of architects that it's going to take to do this so that we can do it together for us and really be kind of, the ones who design our future. So that, again, like just to remove the buildup, the barnacles that are under the water level that have built over time and get back to some more smooth sailing, I think it's just an incredible opportunity. So I couldn't be more excited to do that. Yeah,
another point is generations. And the application of that is that, as we know, our profession, 40 years ago was a different profession than it is today. And I fully expect it will be a different profession in 20 years and 40 years as well.
Yeah.
There's an interesting window that exists right now between old school architects, right, that used to draw things by hand, and futurists who might be able to talk their design intent into existence through platforms, potentially. And both sides are needed, right? The patina and the knowledge and the maturity of certain measured decisions coupled with radically cool, fantastic computational design, et cetera, right? Generative design, all those things. I do believe that improving our profession to the degree that it deserves is a multi-generational, if not multi-lifetime life cycle. And this platform cares not just about the old school folks with opinions, not just the techies, not just the most artful creatives among us, not the most analytical, not just students, but everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because this is about being in service, as we've talked about, to the profession, where you are in the stage of your profession. So there's room for students, interns, thought leaders, top designers, and designers doing new things for the first time, right? That just need help. It's all here to serve and to call on us to spend just a percentage of our career participating in that whole. That's it. And so it's a platform that I think will grow to be a good place of value and a pretty special place over time. So happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for taking the time to have this conversation today. I feel like it's a bit of a reveal of sorts, and it's a bit of a new chapter for sure, for me especially. And so I don't think a lot of architects go to school thinking that they're going to solve this kind of a problem. But to me, like many problems that I come up against, I look at it as a design problem. And I feel like this is absolutely a design problem that deserves the attention that we're giving it. So I hope that people will go along this journey with us. And I couldn't be more excited to do that and talk about it here with you two.
Likewise. Yeah. And Cormac, I want to respect that this is not an invitation to be all about tech and tech app and what we're trying to do. This is really to celebrate what every person in each of their roles is about and try to answer a very simple question. Cormac, how can we make your life better? Mm-hmm. How can we make your practice better? What are you working on right now that you want help with, right? What are your thoughts about what we might be doing right or wrong? I want to hear it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And yet the bigger question is, how do we serve you based on your interests, needs, time, in your career, et cetera, types of projects you're working on, where you want to take your team, et cetera. How can we help? And if we can have a dialogue about that, kind of that cleanly over time with more and more of us, it is a design problem. And imagine the outcome if it's a really fully informed process, right?
Absolutely.
And so let's do this together as problem solvers. That's who we are as architects. Let's do this together, trusting each other, because I think each of the folks involved in their own merit have earned that trust and shown their true self. So let's invite more of that. Yeah. And let's invite as much diversity to the conversation as possible, right? This is not meant to be a narrow track solution. And the heavy lifting then becomes pretty easy for each of us, right? With big outcomes. And then lastly, a moment of silence for manufacturers and the recognition that we all need to just stop for a minute. Give up on your current assumptions about how it works, and how frustrating it can be, et cetera. And then kind of open that back up and celebrate the fact that, wait a minute, as architects, you mean to tell me that we've got hundreds of manufacturers with all the data we'd ever need, chomping at the bit to give it to us and answer exactly our questions with exactly the right information, like in short order and at no cost? And there's a platform that's going to allow that to happen without all the hair and baggage that comes with that in its current process? Yes. And it's not because we've created the solution. It's always been there. It's that we've devolved as a culture based on day-to-day experiences that have somehow forced that gap. And then over time, that gap has widened and it's not serving any of us.
Yeah.
We just got to stop. Contemplate a pivot. Every good venture is aware of a good pivot at the right time, right? Well, our industry needs a pivot. Both sides, all sides. So I think I would leave with that thought. Just take a minute to rethink how you might be willing and how it might look to change your perspective.
All right. So you can either click a button on techdapp.com to get in touch and learn more, or you can send me an email if you want, evan@techdapp.com. And you could send an email to Bob if you want at bob@techdapp.com. And we would love to talk to people who are interested in going on this journey with us and participating and contributing. Absolutely would love to have those conversations.
Sure.
So thanks for your time, everybody, today. It was a fantastic conversation. And I feel like we went deep but that's what's needed. I definitely feel like that's what's needed. This is not just a fancy web page. This is not just there's an app for that. This is a deep, deep problem in need of a deep, deep solution with lots of thinking around it. And I feel like that's what we really spent the time to talk about today. So thanks for hanging out, you guys. I really appreciate it.
It's been great. Thank you.